Welcome to the Human Out Loud podcast, where people share personal stories and experiences in the hopes of creating a more connected world through vulnerability, honesty, and humility. I'm your host, Elise, and today I'll be talking with Jaide about her experience and struggles with the concept of femininity. From a not like the other girls phase to embracing her true self, let's dive in. And I think a really cool place to start would just be kind of going back to your past a little bit, because I know you mentioned having this phase of kind of, not wanting to be like the other girls or kind of rejecting, different feminine like activities or characteristics or anything that's really kind of tied to maybe a typical definition of femininity. So yeah, if you just want to kind of intro what that phase is like for you and how you viewed what femininity meant at that time, I think that would be a really great place to start.
Okay, so I'll start by talking about, for me, having like this phase of not wanting to be like other girls started around like 13, 14, when at that age where kids' interests start to get like more gendered, it seems like. So something that I remember from that time was like specifically rejecting the color pink was something that I had mentioned. Like, it was my favorite color for a long time, and then I got to that age where I started feeling like being girly wasn't good enough. So I couldn't like pink anymore, or I couldn't like pink things. So that was definitely a part of it. But I also remember like sharing these like early memes that were like putting down young girls for liking things that were girly, if that kind of makes sense. The one that I'm thinking of is like there's a girl who kind of looks like a rocker wearing like all black standing next to a girl with like curly blonde hair, and she's wearing like all pink, and they're having a conversation, right? So the goth girl is like, so do you like music? And the girly girl is like, oh my gosh, don't you love Justin Bieber? He's so great. What music do you like? And the goth girl looks into the camera deadpan, and she's like, I like the Beatles. Like, kind of like setting up a joke, like, hey, liking stuff like Justin Bieber or whatever young teen girls are liking, like, that's the joke. So that's something that immediately comes to mind for me, because there are so many like memes or pictures like that on the internet. Or like the other one that comes to mind for me visually is an assembly line that where they're like assembling women, and like they all have like lipstick and high heels and short skirts, whatever. And then like the last one on the line is different, and that makes her special. Because she's not like the prototypes before her. That's something that I remember like seeing on Tumblr a lot back in the day. So for me, I feel like that kind of colored the way that I felt about girls that were girly or interested in that stuff. Like, oh, these pictures say that's bad, so I don't want to be like that. And I think a lot of other girls saw that too.
So were you seeing those memes and those pictures like around that time, around being 13 then? And do you think that's really what started those thoughts that you were having, or was there anything else that kind of started that?
I mean, that's definitely where I started to feel that kind of way. Also, in the past, I was a big reader, so I would like see these series where like the main girl, she's like the main character, she's supposed to be the normal one, and then she has like a friend who's supposed to like, she's supposed to be juxtaposed against. So like, the main character obviously is the good guy, she's doing all the right things. The friend is what like she's not supposed to be. Usually she's a foil. So like I'm thinking of like Twilight, there's Bella, and then there's Jessica. You know who I mean?
Yeah.
Or like Cassandra Clare wrote this book. I can't remember, the Clockwork Angel. So there's Tessa, the main character, and then there's Jessamine, who's girly, and then eventually she ends up being like evil. So I started seeing like stories like that. So the things that I was like seeing, I was also reading about
Mm.
things like that.
I'm just curious, like, why do you think that that is such a cultural trend and not just like memes and people be trying to be goofy, but even just like in stories that adults are writing for young adults and children? Like, why do you think that is such a common theme?
I almost feel like it's to be like more relatable to the reader. So like each reader usually feels like they are in the middle of a few things, right? So if there's a more extreme version, then they can feel like they are more central.
Part of me is hopeful that, not like necessarily like the funny memes, but part of me is kind of hopeful that maybe there's like some good intent there, like in the novels that you were reading of like trying to show women that it's okay to be like, to take risks and to like stand out. Like my hope would be that that's kind of like the message they're getting at, but I think then, obviously something is being overlooked of then almost shaming, other characteristics of people. So yeah, I can definitely see how that came across as like, oh, well, like this person's being painted in like a negative light. I want to be more like the hero of the story, or the cool person that everyone likes. So it sounds like those experiences really kind of shaped your view of femininity as you kind of went into young adulthood, like
Mm.
becoming a teenager. What do you feel like, if at all, it sounds like your relationship with kind of this personal definition of femininity has evolved, but I guess at what stage did you start to see that shift, and what was kind of like different change factors?
I feel like as I've grown, the thing that took me out of that kind of phase was where I started to learn that like there is not just one way to be a woman, like there are so many ways to be a woman and they are all okay. Because if you're looking at it as like the main girl and then the evil girly girl, like it's a dichotomy right there. So you have to be one of these two characters. So when you start to see more types of women who are happy and successful, then you can kind of step out of that box a little bit, it seems like.
Yeah, I love the way you phrased that. And as you were talking, do you think kind of this, I'm going to use the word concept, but kind of this concept that I think women are often put in this place. And again, like I'm not 100% sure where all these ideas come from, where I think we get on our heads as well of, we don't want to be like the other girls because we feel like we have to almost like fight each other for attention. We feel like we have to be better than other women rather than being able to say, oh, my value isn't defined by lessening other people. Like we can all be awesome, but I don't know if like kind of that rejection of like, oh, well, I don't want to be like the other girls and whatever the heck that might mean at that time, if that's also coming from a place of, wanting to feel special and wanting to find our own self-value. Because that kind of popped in my head as you were talking a little bit there. I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
I mean, young girls are definitely vulnerable, so they could benefit from anywhere that might help them feel special. That could be a big part of where this comes from.
For you, I know at the beginning you had mentioned that your favorite color at that time was actually pink. Like, do you feel like you're now able to embrace, the things that you're naturally drawn to and maybe things that 13 you would have cringed at?
I mean, I definitely feel like I'm in a place now where I'm more comfortable actually saying what I want and what I need. And it doesn't have to be like this big secret that I keep to myself.
Hmm.
So, and a lot of that has to do with growing up, taking ownership more or of your own things. So you kind of have to take ownership of yourself too. And if you're out here saying like, "Oh, I hate pink," like rejecting all of these things that actually are part of you, you're kind of shutting off other people too. If you understand what I mean. Like
Hmm.
if you're out here saying I hate pink, but I really like pink, other people who like pink are going to hear that and say like, "Oh, she doesn't like pink, she doesn't like me," and
Hmm.
kind of ruining these potential friendships.
Kind of stepping away from like a personal relationship with the concepts. Um, how do you feel like it, maybe this is like things you've experienced or seen, but how do you think the concept of femininity impacts how, just people interact with each other, how we judge each other, maybe how we set expectations. I guess, how big of a role do you think that plays just kind of like in the social world in general?
I feel like socially, like femininity can be looked down upon by some people. Like, for example, whoever young girls seem to like, musically, they tend to like put that artist down. Like One Direction is something that comes to mind when they were big, and a lot of teenage girls liked them. They were seen as like a feminine band, so they were like an easy band to mock. And then that extends to, adult women too. In society, I feel like things that are feminine are seen as lesser than, whereas like more neutral or masculine stuff is kind of put on a higher rung.
There's a video that I love that explains this, but there's like this really weird gray area I feel like people that identify as being, a woman are kind of placed in of, okay, well, we want you to be, soft and caring, but, don't be like too ditzy or girly, like look a
You have to
certain
like walk
way, but
the line, it sounds like.
yeah, it's like, but don't look like you're asking for it, but also like you need to look nice. There's
Mhm.
all these really weird tiny boxes of like, do this, but not too much. Like, and it just seems like this weird unwritten rule. And I think that can also be something that, I've struggled with, and I think a lot of people struggle with is like rejecting that completely, or like not knowing what to embrace without being judged. And I think that it can apply to men as well, or people that are non-binary, and I think that puts everyone in a really weird position to feel like they have to like pick and choose what camp they fall into, when really I feel like it's a spectrum.
Mhm.
It's not, you don't have to just be feminine or masculine, like you can be both, and I don't think we should judge people for that.
Of course. And I also feel like something that a lot of people are coming around to is that femininity is not just for women.
Hmm.
It's for people in between and for men as well. Um, like in popular media, we've started to see some girly boys, which I'm really excited about.
Hmm.
Like Steven Universe is a show that like put up a lot of exclamation points for me, because we're seeing a boy, being interested in girly stuff, being very feminine, but still being like respected as the gender that he identifies as.
Hmm.
So I think we're coming a long way in that respect.
Normalizing things is like one of the best things we can do, because I think what's interesting is that I think our brains just like when we can predict things and like we understand things. And so, if the media isn't representing a variety of, ways people express themselves, or a variety of backgrounds, or, any sort of diversity, if that's not something you're already exposed to in your daily life, then yeah, it's probably going to be a bit of a shock, and it might challenge kind of your own social norms or like judgments that you already have. So I think it's really cool that that's becoming a bit more mainstream, because I think that's the most like, I don't want to say like natural way, but I think that's almost the most like subconscious way to to help loosen the labels and the definitions.
I mean, definitely, as you're starting to see more types of people, you might be like erasing some of these boxes a little bit.
Those were kind of all the high level questions that I had. If there's someone out there listening that is really kind of struggling with like how to express themselves, or like nervous to be judged as being like too feminine or not feminine enough, I guess, do you have any advice from your own personal experience that you've gone through?
Something that I would like to say to people who are having this problem right now is you are enough. You don't have to pretend to be somebody else or cover up pieces of yourself in order to be more palatable for other people. You can present yourself as you are to the world, and people will accept you. You are enough as you are.
Yeah, the people that deserve to be in your life will be the ones that accept you. If they don't, then forget them. You don't need them. They're not good for you anyway.
There's not enough hours in the day for that negativity.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's awesome advice. I love that, Jade. Well, thank you so much for having this discussion. Again, like I think just talking about, these different topics and like letting people know like they're not alone, like people go through these struggles, and just like sharing these experiences I think is really important to kind of normalize these things that I think that aren't talked about enough. So I really appreciate your time, and we should do this again.
Thanks for having me, Elise.